The next, final speaker of our conference is L, K2UYH. Yesterday I said Peter could be the inventor of moonbounce, but that's for Europe. On the other side of the ocean, in the States, there's L, and he invented moonbounce in his way. He's also the inventor of the EME newsletter and the editor of it. And we all love to read that and to contribute to it. Of course, it also always goes through Peter, so there's a link between these two. That's no coincidence, I think. And what L is also is he's the inventor of the fun test. All of you know the fun test, but that is because it's fun because it's on SSB. L is the inventor of SSB contest. Another thing that he invented. And what you also I think, most of you also experience it. You start on EME, L will be chasing you. He wants to be the first one that you will work. In my case, you were number 2, but now because the first one was, of course, PI9CAM. Anyway. SSB is difficult. I have a small station, so I have about 6 QSOs, but of course L is one of them. And L is going to explain about us how difficult it is, but also how much fun it is.
Well, I think everyone will agree, as you get older, having fun is even more important than it was when you were younger. So actually the reason this talk came about was that we started and all of us, everyone's here, but this is really a joint activity. Can't make a QSO without someone on the other end, right? And 20 years ago, the sideband contest got started. So I thought this was a good time to talk about single sideband. Everyone seems to think that all you can do is make contacts via digital. I think and there is an issue because a lot of people don't know CW today. They get their license, they don't have CW. They can still work sideband. Anyhow, what I was going to talk about here is a little bit about the history. I said started with the 20 years ago we had the first single sideband contest. Go over the single sideband contest rules, technical challenge, recognize some of the top fun makers we've had over the years in the contest, and then talk about future issues and conclusion. So this is, and I'll go through this somewhat fast here, but I guess this is a very quick history of EME. The first EME goes back to 1953. Actually, on 2 meters, echoes were received back then. And then with Sam Harris, if people remember, W1F said J. In 1960, he started off with the first two-way EME QSOs on 1296. That was the first EME band, 1296. And I'm going to try and go reasonably fast here. So anyhow, 1976, we had worked all continents already. You see the history here. 10 gigahertz started out in around 89. And then we have EME sideband QSOs even before all these. Oops, let me just go back. This is what happens when you hit the wrong button. You lose it. And, excuse me. This doesn't help make things efficient. So what I was saying is that sideband's been around for a long time. I have a few of the people here. I should have Peter down there, G3LTF, because he was certainly on sideband the earlier days, VE7BBG, DF3RU, just a few of the people, mainly on 432. There was a lot of sideband on 432 in the old days, I'll call it. And then later on 1296 where sideband's a lot easier on the 1296 band. So the first sideband EME on 1296 was 24 years ago. When I say sideband EME, I'm referring to the contest here. Contest was intended to be different from the start. I wanted to put the contest to focus on fun more than competition. Sometimes competition can get in the way of having fun. and we call it a fun test rather than a contest. We limited the time, kind of the forebear of what we call sprints today, one moon pass only. When we had the first contest on sideband, we really expected a very small turnout. And one of the concerns was, and I see you have contests where you have more prizes than you have winners, or contestants, I mean to say there. So we try to keep this thing very, very simple because we didn't expect to have a lot of contestants. How many people can make sideband contacts off the moon? But as we found out that there are quite a few. And we tried to get as many people, despite what I'm saying here, to turn out and try as possible. One of the other things that was different about the contest is the contest uses the big grid sectors, JO, JN, IO, so you don't have to worry about when you're giving your reports. Report is the sector, not the full grid. It makes it a little easier on sideband, but it makes it something that's doable in terms of a competition. One of the things that is new, and I'm doing the same thing here, one of the things that is new is that, we sadly, and we heard about that guy I was talking about earlier, Frank passed away, and the same way that we have now a Dubas contest, the 1296 Dubas contest, in memory of Doug, VK2UYH, the 1296 sideband contest is in memory of Frank, F5SE now. Hopefully that will last and keep things going. The Y 23 centimeters, well, it's easier to make 23 centimeter QSOs on sideband than on lower bands. The path loss, when we look at path loss, and I noticed that was talked about earlier in the conference, path loss seems to increase with frequency. You talk to people, they say the higher in frequency, the weaker, more path loss you have. But that's based on this concept of an isotropic antenna, an antenna that goes in all directions. So none of us use an isotropic antenna. Even on tropo, we don't use an isotropic antenna. It's strange, the concept of it is, because you go lower in frequency, your isotropic antenna has more area. And so that's why the path loss seems to get lower as you go lower in frequency, because the antenna, this isotropic concept, becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like comparing an 80-meter dipole with a 1296 dipole. You receive a lot less energy. But if you have antennas that are constant area, just the reverse situation occurs. And as you go higher in frequency, the path loss decreases. So if you're trying to make your signal as strong as possible, you really want to go as high in frequency as you can, especially with a dish where you have a fixed area antenna. Of course, there are other issues like vibrations. We all know about that. Who's around the population? How easy is it to generate power today? Certainly on 1296 versus 20 years ago, it's a lot easier to generate power, which helps on single sideband, and we'll see this help as we go higher in frequency. And so we go back to the first contest. The first contest was in 1998, and one of the things that was really a big surprise was that there was a pretty good turnout there. We have any representatives from OE9XXI, Vlad and your crew? Why don't you, everyone get up here. These were the winners. Come on, guys, stand up. From OE9XXI. I think they're still here someplace. I can see them, but okay. They're modest. They don't want to get up. But they were the OE9XXI group was the top fund makers, and they made 35 QSOs back in 1998 and 25 grids. And there was, I'm not going to go through all the calls here, but I have a bunch of calls, which I'm sure those of you who've been around for a while will recognize. These were all people who were active, and a lot of these people are here at the conference still, who were active on single sideband in the first sideband contest. This shows you graphically what's happened in terms of turnout. I like to say that this thing went up like an exponential. It didn't. And this says something about what's going on in ham radio and what we have. But it has increased. You can see it's a kind of a general trend of increase. We dropped a little bit, but I'm hoping this will increase and start up again. So this shows you here that there is variability. Some of the factors that cause variability is that you only have one pass. So if you got bad weather, things don't work out. That's another thing I didn't talk about, but if you notice, the sideband contest is not run during the best time for contests. It's run during, usually in terms of January, early February. And that was done intentionally, again, because there's, you have the DUBUS contest, you have the ARO contest, you have the ARI contest. So we didn't want something that was small. The idea was not to take away from where the other contests were. So frankly, January is probably the poorest time to run a contest in, but you still can have fun. And as the history shows you here, as long as we don't get hit by a big snowstorm or ice storm or what have you, you can go on and make contacts during the contest. In terms of who were the top contestants, I mentioned the OE9 XXI group. The first 2 years, the XXI group from, back then it was still Czechoslovakia, I think, in '98, now from the Czech Republic. K2UYH was the third year, and you can go through it and you can recognize a lot of the calls. Some are not, unfortunately, with us today. I tried to pick out, for the purpose of some of the high scores. The top score was in, I don't know if Nando's still here at the meeting, Nando, but you hold the top score in I think this in here, I'm sorry, top number of sectors. You worked the most sectors and pretty close to the top. And K2DL, who is not here, and our winner for this year, has the top most QSOs in the sideband contest, 48 QSOs on single sideband. So one of the things about the sideband contest I did not mention is that the contest allows people who feel they don't have a strong enough signal for sideband, they can work CW. One of the sides of the contest must be on sideband. So you can work sideband to CW. So if you feel you're a smaller station, you don't have that much power, you can get on there and be on CW and work someone on sideband. That works out pretty well. And the beauty of that is if you work someone, you only get 1 point versus 2 points. Sideband to CW is 1 point, sideband to sideband is 2 points, but you get the multiplier, you get the sector. And that can be very helpful to a small station who doesn't feel they're capable of sideband. One of the things we tried, and this was at the suggestion of the DUBUS group, they a few years ago said, well, let's try and do 432 sideband. And frankly, 432 sideband should be very doable, but it does take a bigger station. You can get by with a lot smaller antenna on 1296 than 432. And for 5 years, we ran the contest basically the same rules as 1296, but on 432. But unfortunately, the activity was not there. UA3 PTW had the best score back in 2011. These were the years that we ran the contest and had some results. SM4 IVE, we have to say anything about his signal there. 1 year he ran it. I had top score 1 year, and Franta, who's around here. Where's Franta? Was here. Franta also had one of the top scores, and then we just kind of fizzled out. So Last year, this year, we decided to try 13 centimeters. Ideally, 13 centimeters should be a great band on sideband. The worst thing you can say about 13 centimeters is broken up into too many bands or too many pieces. But we said, let's try 13 centimeters. I think this is going to be a regular band. So the weekend we ran the 1296. One day we ran 1296. The other day we ran 2300. And that worked out pretty well. The group SP6 OPN, that's the JLW, SP6 JLW. They use different calls in the contest, but I know the most under the call of SP6 JLW. They had the top score this year with 15 QSOs and 10 sectors, and we plan to continue running the 13 centimeter sideband contest. So even if you have a small station, think about 13 centimeters for next year for trying some sideband. This, by the way, is the certificate. If you haven't seen this, this is what we give out this was given out last night among all the hoopla and the great music. That was wonderful, Jan.
And
Really.
at the right side.
Excuse me?
Is that you at the right side?
Yes, probably. This was the 13 centimeters certificate, and I want to give recognition to SM6 EUP. Actually, this certificate was taken from his QSL card. That's where this came from. He did the original design of the certificate. And so where does the future go? We talked about 1296 and 23 centimeters. Well, you know, with the digital domain, and look, I like CW as much as anybody. I've been around here, but I also am realistic. And I know there are people who can't operate CW today, want to get them involved. And having the digital modes, they're not going to go away. I'm sorry. And I don't think it does us any good to put people down who operate digital modes either. There's a lot of things that can be done with it. But you want to get people involved, particularly people who don't operate CW. So sideband here gives them a challenge. And that's the whole thing here, is to have a challenge. The opportunity to bridge the gap between the old and the new, and we still have that possibility with sideband, because everyone can operate sideband, whether they're weak or strong. And I use this example right here to make the point. VE4MA portable W7 or K7, he has made 23 centimeter sideband contest with this little antenna here, 5-foot portion of a bigger dish. What he's doing there is using a larger 3-meter dish, taking a piece of it and using it as an offset antenna, something you might think of but you haven't thought about doing, because there's some dishes and people, but he's actually participated, hasn't won the contest yet, but done very well. So you don't have to think big antennas to make contacts on sideband, especially on 1296 and even smaller, so on 13 centimeters. So what is the future? What are some of the future issues here? Well, as I said, we want to bring new operators on, and so that they can operate sideband off the moon. And the feeling here is when they discover, you know, they can make sideband copies, QSOs, they may try to make CW QSOs. And we've seen this already, a lot of this. I know that DJ3JJ is here. I don't know if he's still around, you're here, but you got on with a 2.5 meter dish, at least on the receive side, and you were amazed, right? 7 sideband stations you heard last time. You can hear those, by the way, at this website over here as an example, again, of small stations. And if we follow on this, so how do we get more people involved in EME? How do we take advantage of this? One of the things that we're proposing now, Dave, I know Dave had to leave earlier G4RGK, and I see this is backwards, I shouldn't point that out, but Dave is working with me, and this is the idea is to have a WAC club for EME. Well, you know, you think about this, you know, what are the challenges? Everyone wants to work DXCC, but you get someone who comes on 1296, right? And the thought of working DXCC is almost impossible to think of immediately. So it's a big thing. But you can come on 1296, and in 1 year or less, you can have WAC. And it's not just 1296 you have now. 13 centimeters, 9 centimeters, 6 centimeters, right? So if we start off with a club, basically the idea is keeping track of who's worked WAC. You join the club when you work WAC, and the more WACs you have, the better. Get up on those higher bands and use them. So this is the concept of the WAC club, because it's achievable, it can be done, and we're hoping it encourages people to get up on those higher bands, like Peter's 6 centimeter band, right, Peter? And it really is achievable on all the bands today. It's a WAC without you, Jeffer. Much easier than DXCC, but it's still enough of a challenge. One of the issues that I've been getting beat up on, not that my wife does a pretty good job of that, is that I suggest that the WAC club be 1296 up, and the 432, and I'm certainly a 70 centimeter operator, said, why not 432? And the only reason we started at 1296 is the definition microwave bands. But I'd like to hear, do you think we should include 432 in the WAC club? Okay, so we'll make it then. The 2 meter guys are going to beat us up next. But I have no problem with that. I know that the OK1KR just received a certificate for WAC. They have it on all the bands now through 3 centimeters. And I think there's others in that position. They may not have the piece of paper yet, but part of the club. As I note, 1.25, I know they got to be looking at that very hard right now. 24 gigahertz is coming up. G4RGK is going to keep records of who has worked WAC, and we now need to design a certificate. So anyone wants to volunteer or think of what we should do in terms of a certificate, I'm soliciting volunteers for our certificate for the WAC Club. And in conclusion, EME, the attraction of EME is the challenge, and that's the whole idea behind this. Come up with challenges that are achievable. I feel the sideband EME contest contributes to this challenge. We got 23 and 13 centimeters right now. The concept, the WAC Club, we're starting up, and I'll cross out 1296 and put 432 and up in there. Will hopefully attract new operators and help the bands grow, and any other ideas are greatly encouraged, or we're looking for ideas. That's the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Thank you very much. Here's your book. Okay.